for this episode, there were more options to choose from as far as events go. And that's because there were so many things that were happening. If I'm going to be able to lead everybody onto one main story arc, there has to be a lot of different, I guess you could say, plot hooks. And they were worded in a way that it's still open. Your character can take it in any direction they want, without pigeonholing someone into one thing. So what we have here, I gotta change my number. I'm getting a lot of weird text messages with links. Calm before the storm. With the fist of the endless now in Anarchy XII's possession, it is only a matter of time before things take a turn, likely for the worse, some would think. There is still an opportunity to oppose Anarchy XII before he learns how to manipulate the powerful artifact. The last few brave G-types, inspired by the Haven Guard's heroics, are making one last desperate push by invading Sector 12 to stop Anarchy. However, Anarchy's alpha G-types who believe in his vision and stand guard in front of his fortress are there. Are you invading or defending Anarchy 12? So mind you, the way it's worded is so that if whatever reason you are going to be in this event, it can be your reason. There's really only two sides. You're either against Anarchy in some form or fashion, or you are with him. You're either a G-type that's in the area and you believe in Anarchy's efforts and his philosophy, or you're not. Or you're there to just fight Anarchy because you don't like Anarchy, or you're there to get the fist. Now, mind you, this is right after the last episode where Anarchy gets the fist. Okay? And he takes it back to his base. But you have to remember that the way the game carries on, it has to carry on, and it has to be written and formed in a way that if a player were to stop playing, the story can go on. So what a lot of people don't know is when Anarchy got the fist in the last episode, it wasn't really the fist. Ivan Bakara and Selena Rend were plotting on replacing the fist, and they were successful in that episode where Anarchy got the fist. So if you were to go back to that episode and just listen to the way things were worded, there's a moment where Ivan goes and gets the fist and he brings it to Anarchy. But he goes and he gets the fist and he brings it to Anarchy. And he was successful in his role because his whole goal in that episode was to replace the fist with a fake fist, an enchanted fist made by Selena that contains the spirit of that contains the life force of a trapped warrior that Selena that's a slave to Selena, and they were successful. So calm before the storm were for people, the people that attended there. They were there to get the fist, but they didn't know that the fist wasn't actually there. And that was the reason for the one scene where, so before we jump into calm before the storm, a player asked the question, can we get the fist's full history and function? Now, the Fist of the Endless was an item that was submitted in a lore contest we had. I think the lore contest was to come up with a very powerful artifact, I think. And there were multiple submissions. Some of them actually there was only one person that won that particular contest, but the rest of the items were sprinkled throughout, and they were given as rewards later on. But the Fist of the Endless was like the major. It was the major item. It was created by a player, so there was no history behind the Fist of the Endless. And just like a lot of things in the game, the history and everything about whatever it is made as we go. It's made by the players. So I believe one of the players actually started to build off of the Fist of the Endless and created a whole character, an enemy, an NPC called Nuad, the Emperor of the Endless. And in his submission for the lore of this character, he states that the Fist of the Endless is actually part of this character that he made, Nuad, the Emperor of the Endless. And because he submitted that, and it's pretty much free range, it's open, that is now the lore. So there's a lot of things that work like that, and it can, and that's fine as long as it's not something that I have already planned on expounding on. And I'll let you know if that's the case, or I probably won't pull it. You probably won't see it because, and then you'll understand because of where I take the story. You'll say, okay, well, maybe he didn't use that because he already planned on doing this. But in this case, the Fist of the Endless was just an item that was submitted. It had all these different powers. I believe whoever submitted it could be inspired by the Infinity Gauntlet, because the different stones in the Infinity Gauntlet, the Fist of the Endless has its separate powers as well, or capabilities as well. So when the player submitted this NPC, Nuad, the Emperor of the Endless, it was this entity that was just so powerful that I knew I wanted to tie it into the main story. He was so powerful though that I would never make him into like an actual enemy, because he was able to just destroy things like that, I believe. I remember it was something crazy. It was a little too powerful, which is also why I went the direction of still having him in the story, but instead of it being his own body, he is in the body of Nam Ki and Rezanok's child. And we'll jump into that later. But as far as a history on the Fist and the function, let me see here. Yeah, so the Fist of the Endless is wanted by all because it grants 4 massive power-ups. So that's what the lore contest was. I knew that Jeremiah would be meeting with some people, and I wanted there to be an item that they are all meeting for. I wanted it to tie it into the Nagamatos who were being introduced to the series for the first time. So remember, the Fist of the Endless was being carried from Dorinthia. It was an artifact being brought over from Dorinthia. The Dorinthian Cache was the name of the lore contest, and they brought this item over. Who knows how they got it? They can expound on that if they want to, but I would imagine that it's something that they're such a powerful crime family. They probably had it, and for leverage, they use it to, they traded it, maybe not knowing how much power was actually behind it. I doubt Jeremiah even knew how much power was behind it, but he knew it was an artifact, but they probably didn't know that it belonged to a piece of a god or something like that. But that's the fun thing about P&D is, everything can be taken and you can take anything and run with it. And you'll see a lot of that in the new system that I'm going to be rolling out. But I really just hope that the players take something and run with it. Like Yin Nagamato. So Yin Nagamato, the player of Yin Nagamato, he's the one that actually submitted the lore on the Emperor of the Endless. But anyway, let me get back to the Fist. So the Fist of the Endless is wanted by all because it grants 4 massive power-ups. Jakan, when activated, the user can travel to whichever point in time once. You have to use a story option in order to alter a scene from a previous phase. And you saw this demonstrated when Anarchy went back in time and started destroying people. Mind you, this was all in his head because at the time, remember, the fist, he didn't really actually have the fist. Ivan had it the whole time, but he was trapped. This was a dream thing happening in his head. One, the player was not in the episode, the actual player. So at this point, all those things that happened was in Anarchy's head. But you see him go back into time. He kills Ivan. He kills a lot of people. And then the second ability was Chikara. When activated, the user can annihilate whole islands with just but a swipe of the fist. Highly destructive power, gives you a passive rank of +3. And that just makes you a powerful, that makes you a powerful player when you have a passive +3 rank to your original rank at all times while carrying the fist. Chishki, gain knowledge of a player's submission. This is where the player would be able to ask me, the director, hey, what is this particular player doing? And I would tell them what they submitted, just to kind of simulate that omnipotence. That was fun. And the Horde of the Endless is the last power. When activated, the user can summon an endless amount of endless creatures to rain terror on their enemies. So I wouldn't be surprised if the player of Yin Nagamoto saw this item and created a character based off of that. And I encourage those type of things because when I saw the character Nuad, the Emperor of the Endless, I'm like, yeah, I definitely want to tie that in. And then I eventually tie him into all of Deathtude and his crew, and we're going to get into that as well. But the Fist of the Endless was powerful, and people who came to this event, Calm Before the Storm, Starrift, Reflector, and Genova, they were there to take that fist from Anarchy because he had went back to the base. So Calm Before the Storm. There were only 3 players that attended this event. And as I stated, they were there to get the fist from Anarchy. The option was, I knew there were going to be people who came to this event. I knew they were either going there to steal the fist from Anarchy, assist Anarchy by defending him, or probably just stirring the pot. And what we got was 3 players who all agreed to go there to take the fist from Anarchy. And surprisingly, the players were Starrift and his crew. So this was also the introduction of a few new players, Janova and Reflector. These were new characters at the time. And in our Discord, I'm assuming they allied themselves with Starrift. Now, Janova and Reflector, they seem like some great associates to have. They're very unique, each of them, in their abilities. And what you see here is Starrift. He is, you got to remember, Starrift is a Raylagarian, okay? But he's not your, unlike R-Type, he's kind of like the opposite of R-Type X, because R-Type is very reserved and to himself, he's a loner. But Starrift, he's very diplomatic as well. Just as he is strong, he is diplomatic. And he's using his diplomacy to orchestrate a little group to do his bidding. And bidding is a bad word, but they are working for him because they see him as a leader. So what Starrift says, when I asked Starrift's goal was to use his energy masking to be completely undetectable. If somehow seen, he would keep his energy maxed to keep his movements undetectable as he attacks. He uses his energy generation combined with blue energy and nature energy to show his dominance and keep himself protected. So in that scene where you first see Starrift in that building, he's surveying Sector 12. He's in Sector 12 on the outside looking at Anarchy's base. And he's just masking his energy. And that was the whole point of when you saw that Gorgon bot climbing up the building. The Gorgon bots see almost everything. These are bots created by Anarchy. They can see almost everything. But obviously Starrift was masking his energy. So that's why you saw that happen. When Starrift says if he's detected, he'll use his energy generation combined with blue energy and nature energy. That was one of his rewards that he got from the last event when he squared off with Epony and R-Type X. One of the rewards that he got was blue energy and nature energy, but he didn't need to use that because he was successful in remaining undetected. He will use his mastery and diplomacy to convince Jenova and his team to join his armada and hand him the fist, guaranteeing Jenova everything he can possibly steal, Reflector an endless amount of victims to put through pain, and Geneva enough power to engulf the world in total darkness. So to me, that sounds like maybe Geneva in the end went and did her own thing, but Jenova is there, Reflector is there, and as you saw, he said, I will use my mastery of diplomacy to convince Jenova and Reflector to do his bidding. Obviously, they're assisting him, but I like how the player said that he's using diplomacy, and that's what pretty much justifies it. Like, let's say, for example, Jenova wanted to betray Starrift. I would put Janova's deception against Starrift's diplomacy, and if Starrift is successful, we could assume that Jenova would be convinced to work for him, or maybe think twice about betraying him. At least that's how it would be written and appear. Let's say if Jenova still betrays him, at least it would look like it was hard because of how the diplomatic Starrift was. But anyway, Starrift will wait in an apartment just outside of Anarchy's lair, waiting for what he wants delivered to him, and that's what you saw there. So Starrift sat on the outside while Jenova and Reflector went to retrieve the fist. Jenova said, while Jenova Reflector, sorry. So Reflector is a G type who has some abilities, some really cool abilities. The Reflectoverse, and he uses reflections. He can jump through reflections. He can see through reflections. He can reflect things. But he seems like he's an evil guy. He's definitely a bad guy. But he's aligned himself with Starrift. So obviously Starrift saw some potential in him. But while Jenova and Reflector are in the Reflectoverse, Reflector will be using his catoptromancy to find where the fist is to assist Jenova in taking it. When Jenova has taken it, he will teleport Jenova back to his verse and to where Starrift will be. So if you remember, before those final two big episodes, there were two smaller ones, because I wanted to do smaller episodes but I didn't like how it wasn't much in there as far as climax. But that first episode, you saw Starrift, Reflector, and Jenova in the Reflectoverse, and they were looking through the reflection, and that's how they were able to spot that Anarchy had the fist and took it back. If you remember, in the shard and the reflection they were looking at, it was like surveillance, because with his Reflectoverse, he can see reflections all throughout the world, and he uses that as a form of surveillance, and that's how they track down Anarchy and the fist. So they found where the fist was. So obviously they were planning on getting in and getting out. Then he says, if there are any threats that come to Reflector in his verse, or to prevent Jenova from taking the fist, Reflector will use his reflection manipulation to redirect attacks, make living copies of the threats to fight them, and trap them in their own reflection. So these are some capabilities that he has. He was preparing to be attacked, and they were attacked, but we'll get to that. Well, we can jump into that now. So if you remember when Janova and Reflector went in, remember it really didn't happen. They were attacked by all of Anarchy's creations. It was a mix of the King's Hand, and the Peacekeepers. And between Janova and Reflector, they did a pretty darn good job. You saw Reflector trap them. Ultimately, he trapped them in their own reflection. Remember, he caught them in the reflection of one of the weapons that he picked up from the Queen. He caught them in the reflection of the sword, and then he just tossed the sword. He just tossed the sword. But Janova was there to pretty much become a massive distraction and herd them into one spot, so that Reflector can get them into one reflection and toss them out. So their ability to work with each other and with their abilities, it worked out pretty well. They make a really good team. And Starrift wasn't even there. This is just Janova and Reflector. So Reflector, to know where Starrift is. So Janova says, I will be traveling within the Reflectoverse. When showed where the fist is, Reflector will let my perfect clones run amok in Sector 12 to perform a distraction. That was the wish of, that was the wish of the player. So when you saw all of those distractions that Janova was causing, that was totally his idea. And because he has those perfect clones as an ability, it was easy. You know, the Peacekeepers and the King's Hand, you got to remember, they weren't actually there. They remember, this was all part of that. This was all in Anarchy's head, because if you recall, eventually Janova and Reflector got inside, and that's when Anarchy caught them and killed them both. He killed Janova, then he went outside and killed Reflector, then he looked at the building, killed Starrift. You know, if I was the player Starrift, I'm like, well, how the hell did he know I was in this building? That was just me just going over the top, because I knew it wasn't real. I knew it wasn't happening, and that's why I went back and destroyed and start killing people just to kind of get people mad, right? And just for them to find out that it was all in Anarchy's head. That was actually supposed to be its own episode with a cliffhanger with everybody thinking they were dead, but I didn't really want people to be mad at me for that long. So I just put it I just front loaded it at the front of the episode. But yeah, so Janova, he gets in, when he says, when I get the Fist of the Endless with my absolute thievery, because that's one of his abilities, I will leave a perfect copy where it was and return to the Reflectoverse. So in my head, I wanted it to, because remember, the Anarchy actually was not only was Anarchy not there and himself, he didn't have the fist. So all of their actions that they submitted would technically would have been for nothing, because the fist isn't there. So I'm thinking, how can I still make their submission happen without them wasting it all? And that's how I came up with making it happen, but it being in Anarchy's head, so they can at least see how they would fight together, how they would operate, and how they would be successful. But so they get in there, and that's when they are attacked by Anarchy. They see Anarchy, and he takes them out. And then we cut away to some other scenes, but then we come back, after we find that Anarchy has been subdued by Ivan and Selena. This was a plan that Ivan had been planning behind the player of Anarchy's back for some time. And granted, even though the player of Anarchy isn't in the game is set up so that players can come and go whenever they please. So, you'll never see a situation where it relies so much on one character, because what if that character doesn't submit anything the next time? That's just going to hold up the story. So that's why, there's always going to be something in there that will allow me to pull and go into another direction. So with the player of Anarchy, by him not being there, I already knew that he was getting ready to be betrayed. So to kind of put Anarchy in safe storage, pretty much, I just made it so that Ivan, Bakara, and Selena are just keeping him somewhere while he's trapped in his head. Whereas normally, if Anarchy wanted to get out of that, he would have to use a story phase to kind of break out of that bondage, pretty much. But in the meantime, until when the player comes back, he'll just kind of be kept, and he's in the void for now. So Ivan, Bakara, and Selena Rend, they were planning on using the fist for their own reasons, while Anarchy has this fake fist of madness, pretty much, with the spirit of madness possessing him. So when you saw Anarchy going on that killing spree, I believe so that spirit actually has a name, Frank. Selena named the spirit, that mad spirit, that would be in the fist possessing Anarchy, and she named it she named it Frank. So if you recall in an episode when Anarchy's like, he replaces his AI that he's always used, the Oracle. He replaces the AI with the new AI called Frank. And that was kind of a nod towards Selena to let her know that what was happening was all in his head, whereas other players probably wouldn't have known that. But Selena knows the whole time. Ivan knew the whole time that what they did in the previous couple episodes where they handed him the fist, they knew it was successful. Just to kind of go back to that, Ivan went to go get the fist. There's a scene in that episode on the boat when Looper and Marshall are transporting the fist. Ivan goes, he gets the fist, and then we cut away from that scene and we cut right to Ivan appearing next to Anarchy. And then remember, Selena wasn't in the whole episode until Ivan reappears with the fist, because he handed it to her and she made a replica, because she's magical. She's an enchantress, pretty much. Yeah, so so Anarchy goes on this killing spree. He kills everybody. And then we learn that it's all in his head. He's actually still sitting in his throne, in his base. And Ivan and Selena are beside him, and they're looking, and they're like, oh, that worked pretty good. And then they take him to the void and they disappear with him. And then Reflector and Janova arrive. They didn't even, that fight with the bots never actually happened. There were no enemy androids. All the androids have been shut down. So all throughout the episode, you keep hearing about androids shutting down. They're just sitting there. They're dormant. All the lights go off in Sector 12. And this is because Anarchy, his mind is trapped in a magical state of madness, in the fist of madness that Selena, in the decoy fist that's attached to him, that he put on. So when I wanted to say this, Anarchy is the master of technology. Okay, he's a technomancer. Why wouldn't he have known that the fist he was putting on was a fake fist, was an enchanted magic item? Why? Well, because I actually rolled that episode. I rolled Selena versus Anarchy at the time when he was supposed to get the fist, and he lost. So that what justifies that is that her enchantment was so powerful that it was able to supersede his his senses of technomancy and made it look like it was still technology. So it was her. She was successful in her ability to fool him. Otherwise, he would have noticed the player. If he won, the player probably would have still gone along with it, knowing the player. But by the player not playing, if he would have won back then, I probably would have made it so that he probably would have. I would have came up with something so that he isn't fooled by it, and maybe there causes some friction between them, and he probably gets something else to take care of them for her, since technically he wouldn't be there. But you know, we cross those bridges when we get there. It wouldn't be the first time that there was a player that was so tied into the main story, such as the instigator, and then the player is not engaged, not in the game anymore. There's so many enemies, there's so many villains, there's so many ways and so many plots to kind of veer off to kind of keep it going. But in a way that it's, you know, no bridges are burnt, to the point where that character could still come back and pick up where they left off when. But anyway, so yeah, Reflector and Jenova, they come into the base, and because of Janova's ultimate thievery, I were successful. I wasn't going to make them fail their mission because they didn't know that the fist was actually never in the possession of Anarchy to begin with. So instead, I wanted to reward them with something. So knowing Anarchy, the player, I feel the player of Anarchy, and he was actually doing this before he stopped playing. He was in the process of duplicating the fist of the Endless. And with his technomancy, he would have been able to do so to an extent. And that's why we have this prototype fist that Anarchy created in his wake. And it was, you know, we'll dub it Fist of Anarchy for now. But that is what was found by the players Janova and Reflector. And they all agreed that they would be giving that to Starrift. So they get in, they get out, they leave with the fist. They know everything was gone. Remember, everything was shut down, and they thought it was strange that all the androids were shut down. Anarchy was nowhere to be found, and there was nothing really there to take. But Janova found that fist stored away. Now remember, after they left, you saw a scene where Oracle activates, and Oracle is its own AI, and their DNA, Janova and Reflector, was taken. I think there was a little part written in there where a little nanobot was seen flying through the air because it had just taken their DNA. And Oracle has been collecting the DNA because Anarchy has the DNA of when he first defeated them, Marshall and Looper. The player of Anarchy wanted to actually kidnap them, but I'm trying to move away from that. So instead I gave them the DNA, because essentially that's what Anarchy, the player of Anarchy, wanted, was their DNA. So I just gave them the DNA. So Oracle is collecting all this DNA to create something, and what you saw were those eyes, right? So that's some sort of android that obviously has the DNA of all of a handful of players. Just, you know, that can be a future enemy, but I just wanted to leave that out there, and see, and you know, possibly making that a future antagonist. So anyway, an interesting fact, Janova looks like a child, very reminiscent of Poke Turner, but it's funny because Janova is actually the brother of Janiva. Geneva, and we saw Geneva late. We'll talk about Geneva later, but she's the one that's pretty much involved with the Gygas armors and Looper, Poke Turner, and Herald. But I just wanted to kind of throw that out there that they're actually related. So very different paths, right? You have Genova, who's just this thief who is working with Starrift, and then you have Geneva, who's the Queen of Darkness, and she's working with the Endless. So it's just, that's why I love the idea of having multiple players and they're all doing their own thing, and naturally they'll be tied to each other, because that should be interesting, you know. That just relationship and being so far in as far as story arcs go. I wonder what can happen in between that. But anyway, I want to, you know, y'all were successful in your endeavors in Calm Before the Storm. So Genova, you go from average rank to above average rank, and you get a keyword, and your keyword that you get is going to be attached to your Perfect Clones ability, and the Perfect Clone keyword is going to be infinite. Now, let me kind of explain again, and I'll do this a few times. A keyword, your ability is one thing. Anything that you can do with that ability is justified. A keyword just expands what you can justify with that ability. So, yes, you have perfect clones, okay? But with the infinite keyword, anything that you can kind of reach and expand on with that keyword is justifiable because you have the keyword. So if you want to say you have infinite clones, you can, because you have the infinite keyword. If you want to say your perfect clones have infinite stamina, infinite strength, you can, because you have that keyword. That keyword is a loose, vague word that you can play off of, and that's why it's attached to your ability. So when each of you, as I go through the list of rewards, when you get a keyword, and everybody who is successful will get a keyword, just keep in mind that you can already do everything you can with your ability, you know, but the keyword is what lets you kind of do things that you normally wouldn't be able to do. For example, your perfect clones, you can't do anything with elements. What do perfect clones have to do with elements? You can't turn them into fire like Shiro Aoi, but if you had the keyword elemental, or if you had the keyword fire, you can now make your perfect clones are now perfect flaming clones. You can play it like that. But anyway, your keyword for perfect clones is infinite. Now, some of you, I'm going to give you keywords for specific abilities. Some of you, I'm just going to give you a keyword and you can place it wherever you want. But also as a special item reward, and we'll say that you found this in the base left behind, a sector chip. Okay, and this is going to be on your character sheet. A sector chip, sector 12 chip. As long as this chip is in your possession, items protected by cybersecurity are susceptible to your thievery. So when I think of ultimate thievery, I think of you being able to steal whatever you want. But I would imagine that when it comes to like data or things that aren't tangible, you could have some penalties against someone who is more technologically advanced or so on and so forth. But with this sector chip, this kind of makes it so whether it's an item or a physical or non-physical item, you're still stealing that shit. And this kind of will allow you to surpass any kind of boundaries that you may not be expecting in terms of technology and stuff like that. So sector chip, it just makes you a more powerful thief, and you can't, there's nothing on your list of things that you can't take, to my knowledge, so far it seems. I'm sure other people can justify ways to hide things from you. But with your 3 abilities, I'm sure you can come up with something to kind of counter that. Reflector, you go from average to above average as well. You go up a rank because you were successful. And your keyword that you get is going to be attached to your reflection manipulation. And the keyword is going to be opposite. Opposite. Now, the word opposite is a powerful word. That can mean a lot of things. So you can play with that. Okay, keep that in mind. You can play with that word opposite. Maybe when you create clones, they are the opposite of, reflections. They in turn are the opposite of whatever, they're reflecting from, and maybe they have the opposite power, or maybe they're the weakness to whatever you are reflecting. There's a lot of things you can do with that. Be creative. You also get a custom advanced weapon, and this is vague because I want you to come up with it, but this is going to be something that you found in Anarchy's base that you feel you could use. It's a weapon that you'll be able to use, whether it be a gun, a melee weapon, or anything, a gadget. This is a weapon. And when this weapon is in your possession of another, you are in possession of another advanced weapon created by Anarchy. As I said, this is something that you found. It gives you a +1 rank shift to your odds of success when used to commit evil acts. So I try to work with your characters. I try to go with the vibe that you all go with, and I feel your character is an evil character. You put that in your bio. He does evil shit. I mean, I believe you're actually helping Starrift, and Starrift is going to repay you with people that you can cause pain to. That's pretty evil. So whatever weapon that you find in Sector 12 in Anarchy's base, I'll let you come up with it. But when this item is in your possession, if you're committing evil acts with this weapon, you'll get a +1 rank shift to your odds of success. So you'll have higher chances of being successful when using that weapon. So I just want to, be creative, come up with, make it so it fits your character. It doesn't have to be anything in particular, as long as it's a weapon and it's technology, because it was made by Anarchy. This could be another prototype that Anarchy found, or created, or designed. Starrift. You go to average. You go to average. And I could be wrong. I'll double check that, but I believe you went to below average because in the last episode when you lost, you went to below average. But you are now back to average. You are rewarded with the Fist of Anarchy. Okay. Now the Fist of Anarchy is a hand. Anarchy could not replicate the Fist of the Endless the way he wanted to, because it is ancient, alien. There's a lot of magic involved. It's not just technology. There's some magic involved. So he wouldn't be able to replicate Chishki or the Endless Horde and stuff like that. But this keyword, because I know you like to take things and absorb the energy from it. This Fist of Anarchy contains a keyword. So if you were to decide that you want to just absorb the energy from it, or what you can from it, you would get the keyword Necrotech. Now, Necrotech is the technology that the Necrofiends use. This is Endless technology. We'll talk about the Endless more, but the Endless, in a nutshell, they are another species of dark, undead, lich-like creatures. And they are very intelligent. So a lot of the things they have use Necrotech. So the keyword Necrotech, you can attach it to any of your abilities. But if you want to if you want to make use of the Fist of Anarchy, you can either get somebody who's super intelligent when it comes to technology to help you kind of unwrap it and make use of it, or you can just straight up absorb the use from it and turn it into a keyword Necrotech. I would imagine you're a smart person. I mean, your character is. I would imagine that you would find a way to kind of, let me see here. You are able to Starrift. So your energy manipulation, you have the keyword already, reapply. I imagine you would just take what you can from the fist and reapply it to something else. You have an armada, you have a fleet, you might be able to find that you can make use of that Necrotech and use it for your ship. I would recommend you get somebody who has some know-how of technology if you really want to make the most of that, which encourages you to, work with others as well, like you have been. So yeah, Necrotech. And then your keyword that you get, the original keyword that you were getting, is going to be attached to your diplomacy, and it's going to be rewarding. Okay, the keyword is rewarding. So whatever, by it being attached to your diplomacy, you could say things, with that rewarding keyword, you can say, hey, whenever you submit next time, you can say, hey, using my diplomacy, I have my peers doing this for me. And they're going to get double the reward because they are listening to my diplomatic direction. Something like that. It has to involve your diplomacy, though. So maybe it's more fruitful to be working with Starrift because of how diplomatic he is, because if you're following Starrift and you're successful, there's going to be a big payout. So it's worth working with Starrift. And I kind of did that because I wanted to I wanted it to go along with this diplomatic Ray Lagarian that you were going with. So yeah, so that's Calm Before the Storm in a nutshell. 3 characters moving in to get the fist. However, the fist is not really there, and they come home to an empty house, but they do leave with something. And we'll jump more into Ivan and Selena later on in another video. But all you characters were successful. Your rank goes up 1, and you have some nice keywords and some items. I was knowing that the fist wasn't really there. I was expecting there to be, in a lot of these events, I try to always make it so that for new players that they can find a way to get in, get involved in the story arcs. So this was one of the events where I'm like, if there's a player who just wants to get into the mix, they're going to go there and they're going to harass anybody who's going to fight Anarchy, or they're going to ally themselves. But there could have been some characters that came here just to defend Anarchy, and that would have been interesting to see, because then Janova and Reflector would have had some competition. But I think it turned out great for y'all, and it might be good. It might be good that you didn't encounter any opposition by that being your first episode. And I'm talking about Janova and Reflector. So you're sitting at above average, which is that's a good place to be sitting. It's easy to go up, it's easy to go down. Going up is always a great thing. So congratulations.